Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. This is just an addition to the previous audio. There were numerous points which I forgot to mention in the course of speaking, which were relevant at certain points in the audio, but they slipped me. So I just wanted to add some of these points. They are miscellaneous, and you can obviously fit them into the relevant parts in the previous audio. So the first point is what I mentioned about the hadith of the Arabian Peninsula, that prior to the hour it will again return to being pastures and rivers. This we also know from other places, other locations. We know from experience and history. So, for example, in Britain, in UK, many hundreds of years ago, maybe for, I don't know, sometime in the past 4, 5, 600 years, there was what they call a mini ice age, where the Thames would freeze over, and people would go and they would establish markets on the frozen river. People would go skating and do all sorts of things. And then there's another time when it used to be known, also written in the history books, where the weather was so hot, the climate was so hot that they could actually grow grapes and vines and make wine, which they cannot do now because the climate is not like what you have in for example, in France and the south of France and other places. So the fact that this variation is known in other places, and I'm sure that this can be found in many other places in the world as well. If you go into their history and read like the earlier works that were written many hundreds of years ago, you can see the variation in the climate. And so that would be before the era of heavy industrialization. The populations would have been much, much less. And so that's a clear proof, a clear evidence that human activity has really got very, very little to do with, as they claim, these great shifts in climate. That's a complete and total lie. So many, many examples of this type of evidence can actually be provided. So that was the first point. Now, the second point is, I mentioned at one stage that what these people want to do is, because they, in their arrogance, they have developed such an understanding of biology and the systems of life and genetics upon how they understand it, and at the same time technology which they are developing, they want to actually there's multiple things going on. Like, one of the things they are trying to do is to grow meat in the lab and to produce milk in the lab, right? And again, this is from the foundations of their disbelief. It is from arrogance. How are you trying to improve on Allah's creation? It's kind of like coming from an arrogant perspective. But it's not only that, it's also they want to take away the means of production from people. So you can't grow your own food, you can't have access to your own fresh milk. They want to centralize everything, right? So they want to destroy farming and move the production of food into laboratories and into industrial plants, right? And they're very, very open and clear about this. Like, they're not even hiding this, that you'll be eating insects and meat will come from insects and it will be lab grown, and whereas what they will be doing is they are buying massive farmlands and they will be using that to grow fruit. Well, it's a number of reasons. First of all, to grow their own food, and secondly, to centralize the means of production. And this is one of the fundamental principles in communism, that you centralize the industrial production, industrial output, and also the food supply chains. It's central to basically taking control over people. So, like I said, this second point is that they are trying to, as if it were, improve on what they see to be the deficiencies in creation, right? So they can make better milk in the laboratory, so to speak. They can make better meat in the laboratory, so to speak. And they want to remove like the independence in terms of subsistence from the people. So, and all of this is coming from like there's a difference between technology and understanding of Allah's creation that works with the principles in Allah's creation. There's a difference between that and between using technology and this understanding to subjugate and to subvert, right, and to use it to the detriment of other people, right? There's a difference between these two things. And so what these people are really trying to do, and the same with when they are trying to to do the same thing with human biology and all these things they are speaking of to do with chips and sensors and putting these in the body to, it's not really about health or medicine, but it's more about monitoring, surveying, and gaining more and more understanding so that later on they can subjugate and subvert, right? So the point being that while technology and understanding of how Allah's creation works is kind of like neutral, it's like neutral in the sense that, if we have a correct understanding of it as Muslims and non-Muslims, like if we have the same correct understanding, that's all fine. But then if you approach that understanding, that knowledge from a certain ideology, right, then you are going to use that knowledge on the basis of that ideology, right? And the elites of the people of disbelief, they are very, very open and very clear what they want to do. And it's not really about giving people freedom and enhancing their lives and giving them independence and allowing them to enjoy their rights that Allah has given to them as His servants, right? This is more kind of really taking control of everything and literally everything, like the means of production, transport, biological systems, as they say, that we want to merge the technological with the physical and the biological. So this, if as a Muslim and the Muslim nation, upon the principles of Allah's Tawheed, His names and attributes, and the objectives of worshipping Him alone and making Islah upon the ard, this is what we, inshallah, this is what we, believe that the Muslim rulers and the Muslim nations would be intending to do and want to do. Whereas the people of disbelief, upon the principles of their disbelief, this is really what they intend. And in a way, they're not really hiding their intentions anymore, because their statements are very, very clear and very, very open. They're not really even hiding this. So, as I said, point number 2, artificial milk, artificial meat, artificial this, artificial that, grown in the lab, and they want to not, instead of enriching people's lives, they want to basically destroy people's lives and make them live in abject poverty, while they basically take control of everything, right? Take control of wealth, take control of private property, take control of the farmlands, take control of the means of production, food supply chains, and they want to centralize and control everything because they believe that's the most efficient way, and that's the way that they can manage and direct things in a way much better than they could with the spurious democracy that they've been using for the past 100 years. Right? Democracy is too slow. You take one step forward, you could move 2 steps back. You can't get anything done, and you're just giving ignorant people a voice when they shouldn't really have a voice. The voice should really belong to specialists and scientists and bioethicists. Right? They are the people who should really be governing society in a scientific manner. Right? Obviously, we know that the science is fake. It's bought science. It's a science that's used for certain agendas. So that would be the second point, which is really that they have an understanding of technology to a certain degree, and an understanding of biology, molecular biology, genetics, and so on and so forth. Um, Even though they are quite blind in a lot of those areas, and they want to somehow use that knowledge to not to liberate people and to make islah upon the ard, but it is really to take control and to subvert and is also from the angle that there is no creator. The creation is haphazard. Darwinian evolution, the human body is imperfect and animals are imperfect and inefficient. And, so we want to just improve those processes in the laboratory with our knowledge. And so really, in a way, it's what we are doing is kind of self-directed evolution, right? So before, we didn't have the knowledge, and evolution is just taking place, and life arose and adapted and evolved, and in a haphazard, flawed manner. But now in the 20th and 21st centuries, because we've acquired the knowledge of all of those processes, now it doesn't need to be blind anymore. It's no longer blind, it's no longer haphazard. Now we can actually intervene, and we can direct evolution ourselves. So this is now going to be self-directed evolution. We can improve the human. We can improve meat. We can improve milk. We can basically take over. That's the actual way of thinking of these elites, of these disbelievers who disbelieve in Allah, disbelieve in the last day, disbelieve in creation, resurrection. Right? This is their basic way of thinking, and so this is where the notion of them wanting to kind of alter the creation of Allah, subjugate the creation of Allah, subjugate the servants of Allah. That's kind of where they are basically coming from. So that would be the second point. And the third point also is, obviously we can see the very clear, blatant hypocrisy of these people, because they say that which they do not do, and that which they say applies to other people, not to themselves. You can see that they travel in their private jets and holiday in their private yachts, and all of the industries they own. I mean, they own industries and companies, and they are the biggest polluters on the planet. They are the ones who are behind these kind of industries, and they've benefited from them for the past 150 years. So they are the ones who create a problem, and then they blame it on the rest of mankind, right? And now they want to punish the people, claiming that the people, for example, when you have a lamb steak or a lamb chop or something, you are the one who's causing climate change, right? Or the farmer, an organic farmer who has his herd, and they're eating the normal, natural, organic, food, the grass and the herb and whatever else, and he rears that herd and then sacrifices it and turns into meat, and he's the one who's guilty of destroying the planet, causing global warming. All right, so they want to take that away from people who do farming, right? Whereas they are the ones who are basically benefited from heavy industry, making millions and billions, and that's what's really bringing all of the heavy industrial pollution upon the earth. Yet they want to blame the common people for that, and they want to control the lives of the common people, right? So in a way, this is open, blatant hypocrisy, and you see them flying around in their private jets, on their yachts, in their expensive cars, and so in a way they resemble like the actions. It's similar to what Allah Azza wa Jal mentioned in the Quran at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah about the hypocrites. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. When it is said to them, do not cause mischief upon the earth, they say, well, we are the rectifiers. Now, obviously, this is in relation to like hypocrisy in terms of the hypocrites claiming Islam, outwardly, concealing disbelief inwardly, and claiming rectification outwardly by their deeds, but really, creating mischief. So in a similar way, these people resemble that in the sense that they claim they are trying to save the planet and rectify the earth, and they are the actual mischief makers, and they're not really trying to rectify. They're actually trying to create more corruption and subversion by enslaving mankind, taking their private property from them, throwing them into poverty, trying to centralize and control the means of production and the food supply chain. They're the ones who are committing, this type of corruption. And so that would be I guess, the third point. And the fourth point is something else, which is more to do with, I spoke in the first audio about weather systems, and Allah has put in like the sun and the rain and, the atmosphere and everything. And so within Allah's creation, there are systems of cause and effect and weather systems, which He is in total control of. Now, it is possible, and this is known and established, that you can use electromagnetic charge, and you can beam that into a certain area and affect the localized weather system, right? So, and we also know that you can seed rain. This is like an whole industry which exists now and has been there for a couple of decades. And even some of the nations, they take the services of these companies, where these companies come and they use the aeroplanes to seed. They use certain chemicals, and they can generate clouds, right, by seeding in the atmosphere. So this is known, and this doesn't mean that they somehow have control, absolute control over the weather, but it just means that they can affect the localized weather systems in a limited way, by way of manipulation, whether that is chemical seeding in the atmosphere, or whether it is by using these very, very large antennas, which can beam electromagnetic radiation or waves into a defined area, and that can then heat up that area and generate like a localized fluctuation in weather, right? So this can be done, and so we should not be surprised. We should not be surprised if these people somehow are perhaps using some of this technology to affect localized climates, and then claim this is because of man, right? We shouldn't be naive to the absolute deviousness of these evil people, right? We know from history that there's people of disbelief who do not believe in Allah and the Last Day, that they think nothing of experimenting on people, on African nations, on black people, experimenting on them with diseases and testing out drugs and misleading them. And we know that there are many, many evil, horrendous deeds that have been done by certain people with extreme deviousness, right? So we shouldn't be naive to think that, given the advances in technology and understanding in many fields, whether that's the field of molecular biology or genetics, or whether it's to do with the climate and the electromagnetic nature of the atmosphere and the sun, and a lot of the true science which they don't really reveal, that we shouldn't be naive to think that there aren't any kind of devious things going on, which they use to their advantage and to mislead mankind. So these things are known and established, that you can affect localized weather systems and cause fluctuations, through various means, right? Through airplanes and chemicals, releasing chemicals, or whether it is through electromagnetic waves in a kind of coordinated way. This can be done, and it's all established, and the science is there, and so we shouldn't be naive to some of this trickery. And in a way also, we know that in the future, Dajjal, when he comes, he will have certain means and resources in his power. Some of them will be simply tricks that are played through advanced knowledge of mechanisms, and other things would be things that obviously we can't explain, and they would either be things that Allah Azza wa Jal allows to take place, at the hands of Dajjal, which appear to be, which are miraculous and out of the ordinary and inexplicable, so of course there are those types of things as well, but there are also other things as well, in which he would be using advanced knowledge and mechanisms in order to deceive people. And so it would not be surprising in the future, for example, where Dajjal comes to a town and he says, "I'm your Lord," right, to people who are basically ignorant, and then they disbelieve that, and then he basically summons the rain, or he summons something else, right? And it's done by trickery and deception, right? So you could you can envisage that the way technology is advancing, and where the common person's understanding of technology is kind of limited, like what I'm trying to say is that we don't really know how advanced technology is, and it might be hidden to us, whereas the people who have that technology and know of its capabilities, they know in advance what can potentially be achieved by that technology in maybe 10, 20, 30 years afterwards. So there's a huge disparity between the common average person's knowledge of where we are in terms of technology, and the what the elites and the people who've got the billions and billions, and what they are doing in the laboratories and the experiments, and especially in like military kind of applications, which we would never really know. And to give you kind of like an illustration of this, imagine you could go back in time, and imagine you are somewhere in medieval Europe, in the 13th, 14th century, and imagine you could take the technology that we know, is capable of being produced. Like, let's say, for example, you take a drone, right? A drone. So let's say you could go back, and in 13th, 14th century England or somewhere, you have this drone, and you're able to control this drone, and you fly over a village, and the drone is able to obviously speak, and so it flies over the people, and it starts saying certain things. How would you think those people would they would be completely and utterly baffled about this thing that they are seeing, and which is speaking? They would think it is magic. They would think it is like from the actions of witches, right? And they could not fathom what this thing is. But this thing, within the scheme of Allah's creation, and a certain knowledge of Allah's creation and of the relevant industrial processes and everything else, this is just simply from the ways and means. There's nothing magical or mystical or impossible or improbable about this at all. It's from the ways and means, right? So at what point does magic and science, where does magic end? And where does science begin? And where does science begin? Or where does science end? And where does magic begin? Right? So my point being in all of this is that there are probably many things that we don't really know, and we don't have the means to explore and understand the creation of Allah. But if you have billions and billions or trillions of dollars of wealth, of laboratories, right, and you're able to buy the best brains, I'm sure there are many things you can discover about Allah's creation, right? Which if it was revealed upon us now, just like in the example I gave of 13th, 14th century village in medieval England or something, right, that we would be astounded. We would find it very, very hard to believe. Right. So we shouldn't be naive in thinking that, there are things that can be done with technology, or that there are advances in technology that we can't even begin to fathom. Right. I mean, even as it is right now, it is possible, like, with all the technology that we have, I can give you a scenario which is perfectly achievable right now. So, for example, a child is born, and you inject the child with a very small kind of vial, like maybe the size of a rice grain, within which there are some basic, electronics and a certain dosage of cyanide. And you can program that chip that when this child, comes to 30 years of age or 40 years of age, then that cyanide will be released and that person will die. Right? You can put a limit on the life of a person. And if that person wants an extension to life, then he has to prove it. He has to show that, look, in my 40 years that I've lived, I've been very productive. And so could you please give me another 10 years? Right. And then that chip can be programmed to, not open until another, to release the cyanide to another 10 years. Right. Technologically, there's no reason why this can't actually be done right now. Right. So this again comes back to the issue of, like, the more you increase in your knowledge of the workings of Allah's creation and the capabilities you have, then it all depends which belief you have. Right? Are you coming from Iman in Allah, His Tawheed, and your purpose being to worship Allah alone and using that knowledge to benefit mankind? Or are you coming from the point of view of you are an illuminist, a Malthusian, a eugenicist, a disbeliever? How are you going to use that technology? Right? So these things that we have to be very, very careful about and be aware of. And, like I said, technology can be, obviously it's neutral, but it depends on who's using it and who's discovering it. And, this is why we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give tawfiq to the Muslims, the Muslim rulers, and the Muslim nations, that instead of being reliant upon the people of disbelief, that, we become pioneers and develop technology and use it for the benefit of mankind. And we're not reliant upon the people of disbelief. So anyway, these are some of the points I wanted to add, which, in the course of the first audio, things pass through your mind, but then, in the course of speaking, they slip you. So yeah, these are additional 4 or so points that should be added. So yeah, when we see like a lot of kind of freak weather, like floods in Europe and other places, then yes, it could be perfectly normal reasons for that. In accordance with what we said before, that this is a punishment or trial from Allah Azza wa Jal. But we also shouldn't be naive not to think there are some devious things going on, because these things have been used in certain wars, for example, or even in the Vietnam War, the weaponization of weather. In fact, you can find documents on the weaponization of weather. And these were used in the 60s and 70s. So these are not, people might find it strange to grasp this, but from the example I gave of the 13th, 14th century medieval village, and then all of a sudden they see technology, right, which within the scheme of Allah's creation is perfectly doable. So in the same way, we are now, like, if you go back in the early 20th century, when people were still riding carts and horses, and they were fantasizing about flying and communicating with people across the world, and lo and behold, a few decades later, that's exactly what's happening, right? And now 100 years later, the whole world is completely connected. So now, if you imagine where the technology can go in another 100 years, right, where with an even greater understanding of the workings of Allah's creation, you can imagine that there are many, many things that would be possible that we can't even imagine right now. So we shouldn't be naive into thinking that the people of disbelief would be using this in order to deceive the people and draw them into their disbelief and make them disbelieve in Allah, and making them think that there is no Lord and there is no Creator, and this kind of really paves the way. You can now start to imagine how some of the things could possibly be achievable, by the likes of Dajjal when he appears. some of it will be trickery, deception, and other parts of it will be things that Allah allows him to do, like what appear to be us to be like miraculous and impossible. So we should be open to all of these things. We shouldn't be naive and about these types of things. So that's what I wanted to add anyway to the previous audio. So I'll leave it there, inshallah ta'ala, and Allah knows best.